Thank you for watching this video tutorial on how to use the NucReporter. This is probably going to be a fairly long video. So what I will do is if you go to the actual YouTube page for the video, if you're watching this video on the website, just hover over the video and click YouTube. It'll take you to the YouTube page. And below the video, if you open up that section, I will put timestamps on there that are labeled with the particular parts of the video that may be relevant for you. So you can just click those timestamps and go directly to those sections. So first, I just wanted to go over what is the NucReporter. It is really just a collection of Word documents that have embedded programming in them. I was the technical director of an IAC accredited lab for 11 years. And I started developing these templates for our nuclear reports in Word, and eventually decided to commercialize it. I tried a couple other different platforms, web platforms, but it turned out to get really nice looking reports. Really, I had to export everything back into Word eventually anyway. So I went back and just made a full application out of Word documents, which I think you'll see works pretty nicely. So it's been refined continually since I started in 2010. And I'd say it's pretty much perfect now. There's no errors in there. There's full error checking, et cetera, et cetera. And the way it basically works is we customize the templates for each customer, according to your IAC policy and procedure manual, according to your personnel, et cetera, et cetera. We also make a nice header for you for your practice. These are just some examples. And if you have a publicly available font that you use on your website or for your branding, we'll incorporate that as part of the customization process also, so that your brand is emphasized and reinforced appropriately. So that's the customization. So basically, for every type of test that your practice does, like let's say you guys do same-day rest stress sometimes and 2-day rest stress other times, and sometimes you do Lexiscan and sometimes you do Regadenoson, then you'll have a template for each combination. So you'll have like an exercise same-day rest stress, Lexiscan same-day rest stress, and a Lexiscan 2-day and an exercise 2-day. So yeah, and there's also thallium viability, there's PET rubidium 82, there's dual isotope, any kind of imaging protocol you can imagine, or stress test, dobutamine, just thallium redistribution, if sestamib is in short supply. All of that can be accommodated. So real quick, if it's a Word document, how does all that work? Basically, for each protocol, you've got a blank Word document, and then that gets turned into a report. And as the report gets completed, it moves through these folders. So you're going to have a folder called Nuclear Reports on a server in your office. Generally, this is appropriate for small to medium-sized cardiology practices. I don't have a lot of, or maybe heart and vascular centers. I don't have a lot of huge hospitals as clients. So you're going to have a server, in your practice somewhere, or you can use Dropbox if you sign a BAA with them. Then that will be HIPAA compliant. And within, so on your server, you're going to have a folder called Nuclear Reports. Within that folder, I'll send you all of these templates where you can complete the reports piecemeal, and I'll be showing you that. So basically, it starts off as a blank template. And typically what happens is the tech or an MA will input the results of the stress test into the report in the demographics, name, etc., history, and then that'll turn into a report with the patient's name. The name of the file will change from template to, John Doe, name of study, name of protocol, which I'll show you, and then it'll be ready to process. Once it gets processed, it's over here in the ready to be read folder. After it gets read, it's in the interpreted folder. Then it turns into a PDF, and somebody monitors this folder, uploads it into the EHR, then it goes into your archives. So basically, the doctor will monitor this ready to be read folder, and then once he's done, he'll drag it down here, and an MA will upload it, the PDF version, into your EHR. So that's basically that. So just real quick, to show you how it works really quickly, I'm going to open this Quick Start NucReporter template, which is basically filled in advance. And so this is what a blank template would look like. Well, not a blank template, but one that's already been filled in. Essentially, everything in blue is typed in. Everything in gray are IAC required report elements. And they're all dropdowns with all the choices kind of in there. Anything that's in yellow is not IAC required, but is sometimes appropriate. For example, millimeters of ST depression would only be relevant if there was ST depression. Similarly, T-wave inversion here, only sometimes necessary. So, but just to, first I'll show you the stress worksheet. Let me go to the blank templates folder here. So you'll get a copy of this stress test worksheet here, and basically you just print this out and fill it in while the stress test is being done. Maybe the front desk will fill out the name and the date of birth and the study date, and then the tech will fill this out while interviewing the patient. Also, the tech will fill out this stuff up here while interviewing the patient. The tech will also record the dosages down here of any pharmaceuticals, the injection site. Whoever's supervising the stress test will fill out everything about the stress test. And then it's fairly intuitive to enter the information from the stress test worksheet. You just write on it with a pen. Everything in blue gets typed into the report, and everything else is drop downs. So, so just to show you real quick, let's just assume you've entered everything here. The way that things get turned from templates into report is, as you can see up top here, this is a Quick Start NucReporter template. And it's read-only so that we don't save over our templates. And what you do is you just go up to this Report Automation tab after somebody has entered all of the demographics and stress test information, and so you would hit this demographics plus stress button. If you only filled out the demographics information, then you would hit this, and then say you saved it, and then later somebody entered the stress test information, then you would only hit this button. But we've filled in both, so I'm just going to hit that button, and what happens is there's error checking that makes sure that all IAC required report elements are present and that they're logically consistent with each other, no contradictions. And then we want to save the report. So I'm going to hit this Create Report button, and it's going to ask me where I want to save it. I'm going to say into the Ready to Process folder. And as you can see, it's asking me to save the file now, but the name is John Doe, or Doe, John. So it's the patient's name, then the date of the study, and then the type of protocol that you used. In this case, so normally this would say exercise, same day, rest, stress. But in this port, for this template. I named it Quick Start NucReporter. So we just click Save, and then we go up here, hit this unhighlight button at the top. If you hover over that square, it says unhighlight, so it'll get rid of all the highlighting. And as you can see, everything's in there now. It's calculated the BMI, it's calculated the age, it's calculated the percent maximum heart rate achieved. It's generated this little exercise test summary section down here. And also it has gotten rid of all the extra drop downs. It's done the error checking, and it has renamed the report DOCOM John A, date of the study, and then Quick Start NucReporter. Normally that would just say exercise, same day rest stress, or whatever your protocols that you used were. So that's that. Let's just save that one more time to save that fact that we got rid of the highlighting. And I'm going to just close the document. I still have the blank one open back there. So now, later, the technologist is ready to process the study and goes to the reading room where they have a PC that has for each PC that is used to create and edit reports, you're going to have these folders on your desktop, or you're somehow going to be able to access them. But they're all really just shortcuts that point to the Nuclear Reports folder that resides on your server or on Dropbox or something like that. So, you know, the actual files reside on your server and get backed up each night. So anyway, technologist goes to the processing station, processes the study, opens it up again. Now it's a patient report, and this is taking a while. I've got a 10-year-old laptop I'm doing this on in a new version of Word. Actually, the older versions of Word are generally snappier than the newer ones. So anyway, everything is here. Then you go to this report automation tab, and now you go to image interpretation. I'll bring up the image interpretation builder. Technologist will choose his name from here, which is put in there during customization. Technologist may take a stab at what kind of artifacts and study quality there is. Physician can later override that. If you want to give some notes to the interpreting physician about the study, anything odd or something they should be aware of, you can put that here. Then the technologist simply clicks Save and Exit Report. It saves all those changes, and you just move the study over to the Ready to be Read folder. So the physician monitors this folder, says, oh, there's that patient. They were done on this day. Oh, that was so many days ago. There's a 2-day report turnaround requirement, so I better get that done. Physician opens that up. Again, I apologize. Usually it doesn't take that long to open these documents. But, so the physician can see all of the history and all that. Stress test results. They go to the report automation tab. Open this up. They say, okay, so Joe processed this. No, I think this is an adequate quality study with no artifacts. Okay, I see that. Okay, well, I think this study is normal. So if it's normal and all you want is a post-stress EF, just choose your EF. Say no previous. Choose your name here. Click Create Report. Error checking is complete. And, okay, boom. So you've got a normal study here. And the physician will then type in their password for their electronic signature. They'll hit the F3 key. That'll pop their signature in there. Now they go up here to this report automation tab again and click the Finalize Report button. Press yes to save the report as a PDF and exit. Say yes. So they'll do that, and it'll get rid of it. Now you've got 2 copies of the report. So now you've got these two copies, one a PDF, which you upload into the patient's chart in your EHR, the other the Word version, so you can amend it or change it later in the future if you want. So the doctor just selects these two files, drags them down to the interpreted folder, and you have an MA monitor this, and they can just upload the PDF into the EHR or print it out and scan it in. Just about every cardiologist is doing this with many, many documents every day. We'll take a look at the PDF, drag it over here, shrink it down a little bit. That's basically what it looks like. And so, yeah, and then after the MA uploads it, they bring it down into the archives. Again, this Nuclear Reports folder is on your server, so this gets backed up. And in the future, you can search by the patient's name by sorting here, by the date of the study, which is roughly the date modified, or you can search in here for the patient's name in the search box, Doe, John, or if you're looking for studies for the IAC, you can look for like a fixed defect. There's nothing in there because we have no studies with fixed defects. So anyway, what I'd like to do now is create a report from scratch and start going through exactly how to use this. So we're going to use this exercise same day rest stress template, and we're going to open it up. And again, I apologize for having an older version or an older laptop. So here it is. When we customize things, we'll fill in all of these drop downs to match your protocols, so that your IAC policy and procedure manual is consistent with your reports. So we'll basically hard code these things in. Where prone images used, when do you normally inject? Do you want that worded as approximately 1 minute before termination of exercise, or do you want that worded differently? Maybe after the stress test you only wait 30 minutes and then you do cardiac gated. Maybe you do prone imaging. If you don't do it on a normal basis, then we can just put this on a space value, and it can be there in the future for the few times that you do use it. So let's just pretend here for this client they don't use attenuation correction, and they don't typically use prone imaging. So we'll just put that on the space value, and on a case-by-case basis you can just go in here and say, yeah, we did some prone imaging. So typically we would unhighlight the green lab-specific stuff, and we'll keep the blue highlighting on for things that you type in. We'll say you typically use the Bruce protocol, and you want to word the peak blood pressure as a peak exercise. The stress test supervisor drop-down is optional. I'm just going to get rid of it, as is the CC physician. You can have those if you want. So anyway, how to fill this in. Corresponding to the stress worksheet, it's pretty intuitive, but basically the first thing you do is you double-click in this blue name box, and you enter everything that you type first. If you just click in there and you start typing away, it's going to look like that. And that doesn't look right, so you need to double click. Which brings me to another important thing. If you ever mess up and make a mistake like that, you've always got this little arrow up here at the top, this undo arrow, and you can just undo whatever you just did. So if you do a bunch of things wrong, let's say you delete this section, then this section here, you accidentally go up to these title bars and you format the text like this, or you just do something totally wrong, you can just always hit the undo button. Or you can hit Control Z, which is the same thing as undo. So I'm just going to Control Z until everything is back to normal. And I can keep Control Zing As you can see, I just undid my getting rid of the stress test supervisor and the CC physician down here. So I'm going to redo and hit Control Y and redo those actions of getting rid of those things. So now I'm kind of back to where I wanted to be. So anyway, to fill out a report, you double click in here until the entire name box is highlighted like that. Similarly, with all of these drop downs that have multiple choices, you can also type in anything you want into these boxes if the choice you're looking for isn't there. So you could double click in here, as long as you make sure that everything is highlighted or a little bit darker, selected like that. You can type in here history, idiosyncratic condition not in drop down. So, but just make sure you double click, and I'm just going to Control Z and undo that. So anyway, so now I've double clicked in here, and I'm going to type the patient's name, Doe, John A. And then what you do is you just tab, hit the tab key, go over to the next blue drop down, and I'll say that his date of birth was 1970, and I'm going to tab over to his MR number, type that in. I'm going to tab over to his weight, which we'll say was 220, and I'm going to keep tabbing through all of these down to the resting dose. We'll say that was 10.0. We'll tab over to the stress dose. We'll say that was 30.0. We'll tab to the minutes of exercise. We'll say he went 10 minutes. Tab 30 seconds. His resting heart rate was 56, and he went up to 168. Tab, resting blood pressure 120/80. Tab, got up to 146/98. So now we're done typing. That's all the typing you have to do. Next, the gray drop downs. The gray drop downs are IAC required. You have to make a choice from all of them. So we'll say the gender was male. Study date was today. Ordering physician, we'll populate this with any list you give us. We'll say the height was 5'10". His history, maybe he had some chest pain and some dyspnea on exertion. I'll just magnify this up a little bit. And maybe some diabetes and high cholesterol and hypertension. So the indication, these are all appropriate use categories up here. We'll say assessment of chest pain, and he also had an anginal equivalent. That also buys you an appropriate study. So, but what was the anginal equivalent? Well, if you go down here, you've got all these choices. In parentheses, they qualify the previous choice. So here we'll say dyspnea on exertion. That qualifies the anginal equivalent. So that's what the anginal equivalent was. Down here, apparently I left this blank, but that should be hard-coded as sestimib. So that's pretty much all you need to do here. This worked out strangely. Okay, so how many METs? 12.9. Resting EKG, we'll just say normal sinus rhythm. Pattern, resting pattern, maybe some late R wave progression and some left anterior hemiblock. Any arrhythmias during stress, maybe some PVCs. Any ST changes, you could say horizontal ST depression of 2 to 2.5 millimeters. And then next is symptoms. We'll say maybe he had some chest pressure, and we can also kind of qualify that with something in parentheses. We can say level 5 of 10, and then reason for termination, maybe we'll say that was chest pressure. And down here for the impression, this guy we'll say was positive by ECG criteria and symptomatology. So now we're all done. Just to show you how the error checking works, if you forget, say, the gender, or let's just say maybe we forgot to put in the ordering physician. And then maybe down here we said that there was horizontal ST depression, but we left this millimeters of ST depression blank. These yellow ones, that's a T-wave inversion. Down here, was any nitroglycerin used during recovery? This next yellow one is, was there any beta blocker used during recovery? This here would be the Duke treadmill score if you want to use that. Also, there are embedded drop-downs in here that are put on default values, like symptomatology resolved during standard recovery period. That's typically the case, but sometimes it takes, several hours for them to recover if something goes sideways. Also up here, like the heart rate response was normal. That's typically what happens on a treadmill, but you could say it was blunted or accentuated. So there's a lot of embedded things in here. Heart rate increased to, that's embedded or defaulted to increased to, but it could be decreased. That would be bad on a treadmill. So, but anyway, we've made all of our choices here except for the ones that we forgot, so I can show you the error checking. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go up to the Report Automation tab. We're going to hit Demographics plus Stress. And it's going to look for omissions or contradictions. It's going to fill in these asterisk fields here. So it'll calculate the age, calculate the BMI, calculate the maximum predicted heart rate, and then it will generate this little exercise test summary section down here. So let's hit that button and let the programming do its work. It says we did not select an ordering MD. That's required, and there's a potential conflict in our description of ST changes. Please review. So I'm going to X out of there. It's going to ask me to save. I'm not going to do that right now. Going to go back in here. We're going to fill in the ordering physician and choose our millimeters. We'll say 2 to 2.5. We'll hit that again. And now we get the success message, which tells us to hit this Create Report button, and then basically navigate to the folder we want to save the report in and press the Save button. So we'll hit Create Report. We'll save it in the Ready to Process folder. And so I'll hit that. And now we'll just unhighlight everything by hitting this little button up here. So basically we're done. There. I'm going to save this once more by hitting this button to save the unhighlighting, and first part of the report is done. So I'm just going to X out of here. And now, like I said before, Technologist goes into the Ready to Process folder up here, opens the report, and here it is. Go to the Report Automation tab. Technologist chooses their name. With this particular NucReporter template doesn't have anybody's name in here. So I'm just going to type my name in here, Jim McGee, CNMT. No comments to the interpreting physician. I'm going to save and exit the report. So save my changes. I'm going to move it over into the doctor's folder. He's going to monitor this folder. He's going to open it up at the end of the day when he's ready to read. And once it gets opened up here, he's going to see the entire history and indications, how much dosage was given, what the stress test results were. And then he's going to go to the Report Automation tab and hit the Image Interpretation button. I'll say, Jim processed this. He thought it was excellent with no artifacts. I'm going to agree with that. And If it's a normal report, you can just go to this quick normal report. So what this quick normal tab here does is it creates a totally normal findings and impression section with just a post-stress EF. So, let's say it's 53%. You can choose if it's to say calculated or estimated for the EF. Usually it's calculated, so it's defaulted to that. If there was no previous, he can just click this no previous box here, or she could click down here on the no previous box. Then they would choose their name from the list of interpreting physicians. This one's not populated yet, so I'm just going to type in here for now John Hancock, MD. And also, if you're using this quick normal tab, you can choose from custom impression sentences here. Just give us a list and we'll populate this with as many sentences as you want. Perhaps you might want this to say something like normal test, no evidence of myocardial ischemia, period. So we'll create the report, and error checking is passed. We'll hit the create the report button there. And here is a normal test. So there's our study quality and artifacts over here. We've got the left ventricle comment. Up here, the findings section typically uses all of the ASNEC required nomenclature, and then come here, Tab. So this top paragraph up here in the findings section typically uses all of the ASNEC required nomenclature, and then down in the impression section you can use more clinical language. I'll show you that later. There's this sentence for the normal range for the ejection fraction. That's required by IAC. Also, they want a succinct impression for perfusion and function, so that is generated here. Here's that custom sentence that we used, normal test, no evidence of myocardial ischemia. So that's where it goes for the quick normal tab. And then the no previous studies available for comparison. So that is what a quick normal image interpretation looks like. I'm just going to hit Control Z here to undo the yellow highlighting. Then the physician places their cursor down here and where they want their signature to go, types in their password, hits F3, and there's the signature. And it's got this little electronic signature time date stamp, which is required by the IAC. So at this point, they could finalize the report, but we're not going to do that now. I'm going to go show you how to generate an abnormal image interpretation section. So I'm going to hit the image interpretation builder. And by the way, if you want to experiment with this, or if you create an image interpretation section that you don't like, you can just always build a new one right on top of it. So for this one, we'll keep the study quality and the artifacts the same, which brings me to something else. Anything that's labeled in red, like study quality and artifact, is an IAC required report element. So you have to make a choice from all of the red labeled fields fields. So you have to say if there was an artifact or if there were none. There are 2 extra artifact fields, so you can have up to 3 artifacts, but the second and third are optional because maybe there was only 1 or maybe there was none. So if the report was abnormal in any way, you wouldn't use the Quick Normal Report tab. You would use the Perfusion tab and the Wall Motion tab. And you might use the Overall Impression tab. We'll go over that last. So first, let's go over the Perfusion tab. In red is LV comment and normal or abnormal perfusion pattern. So let's just say the LV was normal, but the perfusion pattern was abnormal with regional defects. You can also say that there were regional defects, but characterize them as equivocal because maybe they were so mild. You can also say homogeneous perfusion, but with transient ischemic dilation, or regional defects and transient ischemic dilation. Or if you want, you can say that it was stress-only imaging normal. You can also do stress-only imaging abnormal if you want, if they have previously documented fixed defects. But for the most part, you're going to say abnormal with regional defects. So now this is red. You have to add a perfusion defect because you said there was one. So you click that, and now size, severity, reversibility, and segments are red because those are all required. So these are all of the ASNC standardized descriptors for size and severity. Maybe we'll say this one was moderate and reversible. These choices down here, pre-existing fixed, previously imaged fixed, as if you're doing stress only. And so you can't really say if it's reversible or not, but you didn't document it on this test, but maybe you previously documented that they had a fixed defect, so you can say that. And then down here you have some non-IAC compliant choices if you're accredited by the ACR and you just want to say that the defect was ischemic, or use some other non-ASNC specified terminology. But these 5 up here, or 6, are the ASNC descriptors. So we'll say it was reversible and it was in the anterior section. You can use the 17 segment model if you want, or you can just say that it was something more broadly defined like anterior. I've never seen the IAC object to that. Optional impression characterization, that's in black, so it's not required, but in the impression section, instead of calling something reversible or fixed, you could call it stress-induced ischemia or myocardial infarction or any of these choices. So we'll call it stress-induced ischemia in the impression section. You can also say if you think it was, if the defect was related to an artifact. We'll add another defect for this patient. We'll say he had a large, severe, fixed, inferior defect. So there it is. And let's just forget to put a reversibility here. I'll show you the error checking. So optional impression characterization. Well, maybe in the impression we want to call it myocardial infarction instead of fixed, something more clinical. Down here you can do 17 segment sum scores or perfusion defect percent scores if you want. And you can do a right ventricle comment if you want. We'll go to the wall motion tab now. Was there a gated study acquired? That defaults to yes, but you can say no if there was no gated study acquired because of, say, AFib or something. So normal or abnormal LV function. For this guy, we'll say abnormal, and we'll add a functional defect. Maybe he had some moderate hypokinesis of the inferior wall because of that fixed defect. Down here, we can do a resting and or post-stress EF. So let's say he had a post-stress EF of, let's drag this down here, we'll say 35% estimate or calculated, and maybe his resting EF was also calculated at maybe it was a little bit higher, like a 37%. And then you can choose which of those to put in the impression. So we'll choose the resting one because maybe it was a little bit stunned after the stress test. Then we have to choose how to characterize overall LV systolic function. If you want the programming to automatically characterize it, just hit this radio button here or hit this radio button. Choose below if you want to characterize it yourself. But I would just recommend you hit that button and it will choose the appropriate descriptor according to the EF that you choose for the impression. So for 37%, that's considered, anything between 30 and 39% is considered moderately reduced overall LV systolic function. So next we'll go to this overall interpretation tab. This first thing up here are the custom succinct impressions. So again, IAC requires that you say that perfusion and LV function were either normal or abnormal. They want those two succinct impressions. But if you want to go beyond that, you can say that maybe the perfusion shows is abnormal and shows infarct and reversible ischemia, and LV function shows moderately reduced LV function. The only thing I would say with these is if you customize one beyond, if you make a choice from one of these two up here, make a choice from both. Otherwise, it doesn't come out quite right sometimes. So now compare to previous. IAC does require you to say that there was either no previous, or if there was, then you have to compare it with previous. So therefore, this is red and this no previous down here is red. This no previous checkbox is on no matter which tab up top you're on, it's always down here with the physician's name. So if you check the no previous box, then this turns black because it's no longer required. Similarly, if you hit the compare with previous box, then the no previous box down here is black because you don't need to say there was no previous if there was a previous. So here we'll say there was a previous maybe on 1/1 of 2020, and the perfusion comparison sentence, maybe we'll say perfusion shows new ischemia. And then for LV function, you could just say that it's essentially unchanged. Maybe that infarct is old. Next, we have 3 custom impression sentences. Basically, you give me a list for each of these boxes, and we will populate the software, your software, with we'll populate these drop downs with your sentences. So for the first one, you can choose on a case-by-case basis if it goes after the perfusion bullet, which is the first bullet in the impression section, or after the wall motion bullet. Here we'll choose after the perfusion bullet. And there's nothing there, but you can also type on the fly if you want. So here I'm just going to say custom sentence 1. Down here, just going to copy that and paste it down here and here. And I'm going to change that to a 2. And I'm going to change that to a 3 just to show you where those go. You can make a recommendation for the patient, maybe recommend cardiac catheterization, PCI if indicated. You can put some free text in here, and that'll be a bullet at the very bottom. So let's hit create report, and we've got this error message here. You chose to add perfusion defect 2, but you didn't fully describe it. Okay, so let's go back here, and here's the second perfusion defect. Yep, we forgot to specify the reversibility. Let's try it again. Success. And so now we have an abnormal report, and we're pushing towards the bottom of the page here. but I don't think you would normally have this much text on a page. If you did, you can, and it spilled over to 2 pages. I'm a big proponent of 1-page reports, so I would reduce the font size to fit it on 1 page if it came to that, because it's just a lot easier to read mostly and digest at a glance if it's on 1 page. Also, when you start getting into multiple pages and you fax things to referring physicians' offices, they can separate the pages and get confused. So to go over this, here we have our 2 defects with the ASNIC descriptors. Down here, we called the reversible defect stress-induced ischemia, and we called the fixed defect myocardial infarction. So it's a little more clinical language. Here we have those custom succinct impressions for perfusion, infarct and reversible ischemia, and for LV function, moderately reduced. And up here we have the 2 different resting and post-stress EFs, but down here in the impression section we have the resting EF, because that's what we chose to go down there. And so overall LV systolic function is characterized automatically as moderately reduced, which is correct for 30 to 39%. Down here we have custom sentence 1, that's where that would go, custom sentence 2, custom sentence 3, and again, just give us lists and we'll populate that for you. Here is the compared to previous sentence, and then finally the recommendation, which goes in the same bullet as the compared to previous. So we still have the signature because we had generated this report previously. This time date stamp is a little outdated now, so if you just go up to the top here and hit this little clock where it says insert signature date time and just click on that, it'll get updated. In this case, just the time. So that's really about it. Once again, just to demonstrate the signature functionality, the doctor would place his cursor there, type in his password, click F3, and his signature appears. And then next, he would click Finalize Report and just say yes, and yes, and that will close the Word document and generate the PDF. And here it is. Here are both files right here. We'll drag them down into the interpreted folder where the MA monitors that, and we'll take the PDF and upload it into the patient's chart in the EHR. And that's what your final report will look like. Except it'll have your custom header up at the top. And so, it's a nice 1-page report. It's pretty clearly labeled. You've got your, for the exercise test, your little clear summary there, so people don't have to go hunting through all this IAC required stuff. They just get the highlights. Nice, clinically relevant impression section, while still meeting the ASNIC and IAC required terminology up here, so that your reports are standardized, and your custom header would go up here at the top. So that's basically how everything works. Again, we'll drag this down to the archive section, and just to demonstrate how you can, for a technical director who's trying to find reports for the IAC, maybe you need a report with a fixed defect and you're searching for examples of that. You can just go into the search box down here and type in fixed. And there's the study that we just created, because that did have a fixed defect in it. So that's pretty much it. That's what the reports look like. And yeah, I think that shows about everything. Okay, thank you for watching.